Some people are lucky enough to get paid for the thing that they love to do. I'd like you to meet David Powell, a fish biologist and Vice President of Research at Proficient Incorporated. This man lives, eats, and breathes fish for a living and for fun.
Well, I've always been a fisherman. Even as a 3 and 4-year-old, I used to play around with fish, and I had a friend that was a big fisherman, so we always went out. And when I went to school at Union College, I was in a laboratory and I was reading job listings for people that did fisheries work, and it had never occurred to me that I could actually get money and paid for investigating things that I've always been curious about. So that's kind of how I got into it.
When I asked Dave about eating fish, I wanted to know what his opinion was on wild versus farmed fish. There's been a lot of controversy surrounding this topic.
People worry about whether the quality of the fish is good or not for eating a farm fish versus a wild fish. And most of the time they're actually comparing two different species of fish. It'd be kind of like comparing beef to pork. They taste differently, and different people like one more than the other for various reasons. Farm fish generally are Atlantic salmon. Wild fish, especially in Washington State, are generally Pacific salmon, such as coho and Chinook salmon, king salmon. Those aren't grown as commonly in fish farms. They are sometimes, but most people grow Atlantic salmon in fish farms here because they tend to be happier in the cages. They grow really fast, so they're more economical to grow. And the food that they get is actually kind of like a bread. Think of it as a dark bread that they feed them. They have vitamins and various other materials. They do grind up herring to supply them with food, but they also are using wheat and various other farmed vegetable products to make the food more economical and also healthier for the fish. Well, one of the things that I like to do is go fishing in a pretty small boat, and I have a close friend who has only a 12-foot boat with a little 6-horse motor. And we went out one day on Puget Sound, and we were actually fishing for some small bottom fish, but decided to go and try for a halibut, which of course most people know is quite a larger fish. And we were fishing almost all day, and when we got there to this one spot, we said, okay, 10 more minutes, and we'll just fish for 10 more minutes. So we dropped our lines down, and 5 minutes later, boom, I get this really big fish. I could tell it was a halibut. And the thing about halibut is that when they get their head above the water, that's when they freak out. They just splash all around. And so it was like, keep its head down, keep its head down. Well, this fish is so big, he did whatever he wanted to do. And he got his head out of the water, which freaked him out. No lie, the splashing was 5 feet high above the water. We had this little boat with no halibut spear, no gaff. My friend had actually put a little hook on the end of a stick, and we looked at that and went, that ain't gonna do anything. And so this big halibut was so big that he fought around the boat probably about 40 minutes. And when we finally got it to the boat, we tried lassoing it and these different things. We ended up putting its head into the salmon net, and I grabbed the body and tail and we flipped it into the boat. Now this is a really dangerous thing to do with halibut because people have been known to have broken ribs and broken noses from these big fish. But we were lucky because the boat was small. The head went under one seat and the tail went under the other seat, and he landed in upside down, which tends to calm fish down. But even so, the head and the tail were going pop, 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 pop like that. And so we were able to subdue the fish and then bleed it and keep it calm and then take it in. And so the funny coincidence was when we took the picture, I had my daughter holding up the little sign as to how much it weighed, and she weighed exactly the same as the halibut. They both weighed 57 pounds. So that's the biggest fish I've ever caught. And I belong to a fishing club, and I got Fisherman of the Year because people just don't catch that many halibut in Puget Sound. They're mostly bigger ones in Alaska.
As an avid fisherman, David chooses to fish in a variety of locations. Living in Seattle affords him the close proximity of many lakes as well as the Puget Sound. Loading his canoe on top of his van makes for a quick getaway to Lake Sammamish, which is just a mile from where he lives.
Well, the The thing about fishing is, and it turns out about 40% of the people in the United States do fish at one time or another during the year. And there's so many different ways of doing it. And it requires a certain amount of sporting and a certain amount of skill and a certain amount of luck. And so all those things have to play in together. You really have to know what you're doing to catch fish consistently, but you can be a beginner trolling a worm, which isn't the proper way of doing it, and still catch the biggest fish of the day.
And with that, I am reminded of what Patrick McManus once said: there are two best times to go fishing, when it's raining and when it ain't.